Today, my guest is Abby Grace. She is a wedding photographer turned branding photographer. She's an educator, a speaker, and the host of the Artisan CEO Podcast. And on the show today, we are talking about how she transitioned from weddings to branding and how you can do that as well. So, Abby, I'm excited to talk with you today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I was so excited when we got your email. I cannot wait to dive into this.
Yay. Yeah, I cannot wait either. And also, I want to pick a bone with Instagram for a minute.
Okay.
Because Instagram is how I mostly follow you. I should really subscribe to your email list with an email that I check more often.
Okay.
But I didn't realize that you had a podcast as well. Because that's been like a few months, right?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. This is something we just had our Q4 meeting this morning. We're a couple days behind, and
Nice.
That's something that we've been struggling with is like, how do we market the podcast in a way that doesn't make people blind to it, because like, oh my gosh, we get it, you have another podcast episode, but like at the same time not talking about it at all, which is what we've been doing, is also not really a way to grow a podcast either. So it's not your fault that you didn't know. We launched it back in August and then didn't talk about it again, even though we've been uploading new episodes. So yeah, that's my bad.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was like, I went to your Instagram and I was like, so many of these I have not seen pop up in my feed because the algorithm is garbage. And then I saw the Artisan CEO. I was like, what? Abby has a podcast? How have I not heard this? So
this is actually really good voice of customer data for me to know.
There we go. I'm glad to help. But yeah, so if you see a spike in your listens for the last couple of days, I just binged every single episode.
Yes.
In like a day and a half.
Oh, good.
Great episodes, by the way. I feel like, and I should probably write this in a review for your podcast as well, but it felt like, I don't know if this is going to be positive or not, but it felt like early 2000s, like webcam type blog or vlog, I guess, where you're just like, you're just speaking to me as the viewer or listener, and just it felt like very upbeat and very informative and very just like chatting with a friend, or like you're speaking to your future self or something. And I was just like, yeah, it's like pulling me in. I just wanted to listen to another episode.
Oh, I love that. It's funny. We got some like reviews from people like, you should read children's books. You have a very soothing voice. Like, all right. Interesting feedback. Maybe a career option I've never considered before, but we'll go with that. You're not getting the best version today because everyone in my family is sick, but maybe for the future. That's my retirement plan, is to read children's books.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what my wife is wanting to get into, because there's a good business of just reading, like being the narrator for audiobooks.
Yeah, I would bet, especially with how much Audible is blown up these days. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I do most of my reading.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I can either make time to sit and read, which I usually do on airplanes or on the beach, rarely at home, or I can just pop it in my ear and then just go throughout the day and be very prolific in all my readings.
That makes sense. Yeah. For me, if I listen to a book on Audible, it's got to be one that like I don't need to take notes on, like something I'm just listening to.
Yes.
Usually like Audible books for me are more like mindset shift books, kind of like how I treat podcasts. Like I'm not sitting down with a podcast and taking notes.
Right.
So like I like to highlight in my book. So if it's a book that I want to come back to again and again, I'll usually read it. But otherwise it's Audible.
Yep. Same here. Yeah. If it's something that I need to sit and take notes, I'm like, I cannot just listen to this. I have to physically read it and then mark all over the books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I know some people are cringing at that, but like it's how I endear myself to the book. Like,
and also I paid for
connected.
it. I can put pen marks in it if I want to.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want with that book. Well, awesome. Well, okay. So Abby, could you give us a little bit of background of where you're based, what you photograph, what you love doing, all those things?
Yeah. So I am based just outside of Washington, D.C. And like you mentioned, I started out shooting weddings. I started in 2009. And then over the last several years, we transitioned into brand photography. And at first I thought it was going to be just like I'll do weddings and brands, and maybe eventually over the next like 10 years, I'll pull back on weddings. And branding took off much more quickly than I was expecting. And, the COVID accelerated the pivot. And so we have 2 weddings left this month. And then I'm done. I shot my last engagement session a few months ago. It was very strange driving home from that, and very freeing. And it's been incredible. Like we made the decision to pivot because one, I could just feel myself becoming burned out from weddings, and I didn't. One of my number one values is integrity. And if I was going to show up to somebody's wedding, I wanted to be 100% there. And I could just feel myself starting to check out. And I was like, that's not fair to my clients who are paying, sometimes $10,000+ for me to be there. So we need to make sure that wherever I am, that I'm all there. And I can't be all there for weddings anymore. Just emotionally, I'm not present anymore. So it's time to start phasing out. And that's not to say for my I'm so excited for our 2 weddings that we have left. And, I wanted to be able to continue to be all there, right? So we decided to phase them out because I could see that becoming a problem. But then also, when we became parents, I knew in the future, I didn't want to spend every Saturday during the best weather of the year, which for us in Northern Virginia is April through June, and then September through early November. I didn't want to spend every single Saturday documenting other people's milestones and missing my own kids' ballet recitals and soccer games. And so we made the decision to implement branding photography, again thinking that it would just be a separate another stream of revenue that would help pad easing back from weddings. Right. But it took off on its own. I did not realize how much of a gift I had for this specific type of photography. And then when things started accelerating, I was like, oh, I think we can actually completely leave weddings behind. And then we did.
Nice. Great. Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine that's almost like leaving a job that you really love, like you leaving that last engagement session, and just that bittersweet feeling of this was the last one. Yeah. Am I going to shoot a couple again for an engagement, and that kind of feeling, but also the excitement of moving on to something new and different. And something where I think that's really really self-aware, that self-awareness that you had of feeling I'm not giving my couples my best self, or I'm not as excited as I used to be about these weddings. And I know I'm pretty much in the same boat as you were a couple years ago, where I'm my oldest is turning 8 in a couple of months, and we're getting into extracurricular sports and stuff where I've missed so many birthday parties because I've had to shoot weddings on Saturdays, which I love the weddings and I love my couples, but I'm feeling the same thing of my family has always come first, and that was the reason that I started this job and left my other one, so that I could be more present with them. And now seasons are changing and things are shifting around, so business is needing to shift.
I can't remember who it was that I was talking to, but it was a well-known photographer. And the reason I can't remember is because several of my clients are well-known photographers. But they said that wedding photography has a shelf life for most people. And I was like, ooh, that's a really interesting way of putting it. I mean, it's hard on your body, and it's I think there's also a season of for me, my season of life that I was so excited about weddings was because I had recently been married, and I just felt like I connected with my couples on an interpersonal level much more directly than I do now. And that's not to say that you can't be a wedding photographer if you're not, in your 20s or in your 30s or anything like that. But for me, I'm a very passionate person. I'm either, if it's not a 10, it's a 1, right? And so if I'm not at a 10, then I can't fake that, and I refuse to fake that because number one value is integrity, and so I'm if I can't be 100% there, they deserve somebody else who will be, which is maybe a little extreme. But at the same time, I was you are paying this much money for somebody who should show up and be all there, and if you can find somebody who can be all there, who doesn't feel the need to emotionally be there, it's just a thing they can turn on or off, great, go for it. But for me, we just we just started this business I started this business because I love photography, but the reason that my husband and I work together is because we want a business that supports a life that we love. And when the life changes, the business needed to change with it in order to continue to support that life that we love. So like as life changes, so the business does too. In order to work more with that lifestyle. So like I didn't want to be missing bedtime routines because I was meeting with clients at 8 p.m. because that was when they were available. I didn't want to be shooting engagement sessions on, you know, in the evenings or at sunrise and just be like, you miss dinner time, or like, you know, you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you shoot an engagement session for the cherry blossoms and you're wrecked for the rest of the day. My business we needed to recognize that our life was taking a new direction. And so because of the vision that we specifically had for the business needed to follow suit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so good. Like just to constantly be reassessing your values, your priorities, and as life is changing and as things are shifting, do things need to shift in your business as well? Because some people, like they, you know, start in your 20s, you don't have any kids, maybe you're single and you're just loving weddings. And then you get into 30s and 40s and you got a family and you're still loving weddings and it's not interrupting your lifestyle and all that. And you know, that was
my mentor. Like my mentor was I think he was in his 30s when I was shooting when I apprenticed under him. He's still shooting weddings. He and his wife work together. They love weddings. They're one of those people that can turn it off and turn it on. But for me, it can feel all consuming, and it just wasn't working. But I was that girl. I started when I was 22 when I shot my first wedding, and shot all the way through my 20s and into my early 30s, and then realized just this wasn't working anymore, so we changed it, and we're really grateful we did.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. So before we get into branding photography and like that transition that you made, has there been, like through your career, has there been either like a piece of advice or a lesson or something that you've learned that really changed your outlook on your business?
Yes. There's that Amy Poehler book, Yes Please. It's the one where she's like raising her hand on the cover, and she says in the book, good for her, not for me. So like that it's okay to behold other people's goals and say, that's really great that you checked that off. I do not need to feel like I also need to do that. One of my biggest struggles is pride, and I'm enormously competitive. And so like I would see someone else doing something like, oh, well, they booked a wedding in Mexico. I need to book a wedding in Mexico, and I need to not just book one. I need to be the go-to destination wedding photographer for Mexico weddings. And it's like, whoa, see what I mean? Like I said, I'm either a 1 or a 10. That's a 10. And so that was causing a lot of strife of like seeing all of these other people getting things that I wanted. But then I had to step back and be like, do I actually want those things, or do I just want them because she has them and I think that's what I'm supposed to want? So being able to step back and say, okay, good for you, not for me. I'm going to keep my eyes on my own paper because these are the goals that the Lord has set before me, and this is the vision for our business that the Lord has set before me, and I can appreciate the magnitude of what that person over there is doing and admire what a cool thing that is for them without also then assigning that to my own goal sheet.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I am very much an achiever, and like possibly an Enneagram 3. I still haven't landed on where I am, but like that's very much me, where I was seeing other photographers traveling all over the place. I'm like, that's what I want to do. Yeah. And then I would see them, you know, really doing anything, or like speakers speaking at big conferences.
Like, do I need to release a course? Should I have a shop? Like, should I start a podcast?
Yeah. Exactly. There's all those things that everyone else is doing, and it's so easy to compare and just be like, that's what I need to do next. Yeah. That looks great.
That looks like what people who are accomplished do, therefore I need to do that, as opposed to taking the time to sit with 100%. It. Like, is this what's right for me? And not just is this what's right for me, like emotionally, how do I feel about it? But like, is this going to directly support the goals that we have for our business? Because, you know, I look at some of the people in my mastermind and the things that they're doing to market their business, and I'm like, oh my gosh, do I need to be doing those? And it's like, no, some of those people are running $5-10 million businesses, and like, I don't want to run a $10 million business. I don't want the infrastructure that comes with that. I don't want the additional help that would need to come with that. Like, I'm happy with the monetary goals that we've set for our business, so I can appreciate good for you hosting a conference in your industry. I don't need to do that because that doesn't directly feed into the type of goals that we have for our business. So good for you, not for me.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. And that leads to so much more happiness and contentment with your life, where you're not constantly just like, oh, they're doing this, I also need to be doing that.
Yeah.
But you can be happy for them and excited for them, and be excited and happy for what you have going on in your life. And there's less of that comparison. I love that. It's something, my wife says something very similar. She says, what does she say? Like, I'm so, what does she say now? I'm trying to get the right wording. I'm so happy for you. Like, or that's so exciting for you, where she's like, she is excited for them, but it's not for her. So just like that, that I think that is such a great mindset to have moving forward. Because that keeps you from also just like spidering off into 100 different directions, because other people are moving in one direction and you see them moving in that one. You're like, I also have to be doing that.
Yeah.
And then someone else is moving in their one. Or like, is this what I'm
supposed to be doing? Like, our success, like they are a successful person. Does that mean that's what I'm supposed to be doing too?
Yeah. 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 Okay. I love that. Okay, cool. So let's talk about branding photography. How, like, what are some of the things that you noticed that you had to change when you transitioned from weddings into branding?
Yeah. So the biggest one, because I teach a course for brand photographers, and most of my students are either wedding or family photographers who are looking for an off-ramp from their current industry, or they're looking to diversify their income. So they want just like another source of income, maybe during the slower months for weddings and families. And the number one mindset issue that we have is people coming in and thinking, well, I can just shoot a brand session like I do a wedding or a portrait session. And it's a completely different approach. Weddings and families are more of a relational documentation. Like, you're showing up and you're documenting the relationship between two people, the love, the joy, the excitement of a wedding day. You're documenting the event. At a family session, you may have prompts that you use and poses that you use, but you're documenting interpersonal relationships. You're not creating something new. You're documenting what is already there. For brand photography, it's more conceptual image creation. So you're taking this intangible concept and trying to figure out, how can I put a tangible visual to that? So it's a different part of your brain. You're not thinking like, well, I'll just show up and shoot whatever's in front of my camera. It's you sit down before the shoot and like storyboard out, what do we need to do to make sure that this business owner's visuals align with how they want their brand to be perceived? Because brand photography really is just visual messaging. Like, so if I were shooting a brand session for someone who is not just a service provider, but also a course creator, I need to figure out, how can I show the services they provide and the courses that they create without just photographing them in front of a laptop. So I have to sit down and get really creative and think about, how can we tell that story within the frame? And so where we see a lot of photographers go wrong when they're coming from a wedding or family background is they're like, well, I'll just photograph them with the tools that they use. They use a laptop, they use a phone, I'll shoot them with their laptop. And that's where you end up with social media feeds flooded with people cheesing at their MacBook Pro, which is boring and forgettable. And so the key difference is learning to approach brand photography like a strategist and a marketer, not just a relational documentarian. You're creating what's inside the frame, not just documenting what's already there.
Yeah. Oh, that's such, like, I mean, like you said, it's a different side of your brain, because like for me, currently mostly shooting weddings, I am going to, like, I have a game plan going into a wedding for sure. Like, we have our shot list, we have things we need to take care of, but it is mostly more documentarian style of, I'm going to photograph what's going on. I'm not going to shape and mold so much. I mean, there are wedding photographers who do that. Yeah. But yeah, that's not our job. But as a branding photographer, like, that is your job. You're not just going to show up and be like, all right, so you have the product on this table. Let me take some photos of what it's doing on the table. Like, don't worry, I got this.
I'm great at flat lays.
Yes.
Like, because that's what I did. That's what my first brand shoot I ever did was for Natalie Frank of the Rising Tide Society.
Yeah.
And I showed up and I approached it exactly like a wedding photographer would. I was like, what time do I need to be there? Where are we going? Like, who all's going to be there? And like, great, I'm pretty good at styling flat lays. I'll show up and just, do that. I'm good at posing people. I'll do that. And so the final result was a gallery of pretty photographs because I'm a good photographer, but like there was no purpose behind any of those images. There was never once did it cross my mind to ask Natalie, what are we trying to say with these photographs? What are you trying to communicate to your audience? I knew that Natalie was moving from being a wedding photographer to stepping into her role as a community leader and then eventually in the future as an author, but never once did it occur to me, how can we craft a photograph that tells the narrative that she is an author or that she is a community leader? It was just like, what's cute,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. I feel like that's so much more to go into in the front end. Like before branding sessions.
Yes,
There's
and that's
so
one of the big differences. Like I spend hours researching my clients and creating a shot list. Yes, people, a shot list. It's not a dirty 4-letter word like it is at weddings. And like I come in with if it's a full day shoot, usually a 2-page shot list of ideas that I have come up with to help my clients illustrate what it is they're trying to say. Because what I always say is with brand photography, it's a matter of a brand is a successful brand is when you connect the brand owner's intention with audience perception. When those two things are on the same page, we're doing okay. When someone needs a brand session is when your intention for the brand has not aligned with audience perception. Maybe you're trying to portray yourself as a luxury photographer, but like you're still booking budget weddings. There's a problem. There's a disconnect. So then how can we use your brand photos to bridge that disconnect to help people perceive your brand the way that you intend?
Okay. So how for someone who does not have shot lists, does not have all that front end work, what are some first steps to maybe move in toward that when planning for a branding session?
So are we talking like you have a brand session tomorrow or you have a brand session next week or like 3 weeks from now? How much prep time do we have?
Let's give us some lead time here. So like 3 weeks.
Okay. So ask your audience, your client. First of all, you should always have a pre-shoot strategy call. That is one of the biggest tools in my toolkit is that pre-shoot strategy call, because that allows me to make sure that the brand owner and I are on the same page. They've already filled out a pre-shoot questionnaire, and I use that pre-shoot questionnaire to jumpstart my research. But then that strategy call is like, okay, here are my ideas for your shoot based on the goals that you've told me you're working towards. So the number one question to ask your clients. So, okay, let me work backwards. You got to shoot 3 weeks from now, get on the phone with your client as soon as you can. And the number one question to ask them is, what are your top 3 goals in the next 6 months? Because the purpose of their brand photos is to support those goals. Like those brand photos are a marketing asset for them, for the business owner. And so how can we make those marketing assets directly support your marketing efforts? So if they tell you, okay, my top 3 goals for the next 6 to 12 months are I'm adding team members, I am launching my first course, and I'm going to rebrand myself as a destination wedding photographer. Okay, great. Then we need to have some travel elements in your shoot. So what can we pull in to start to speak to that travel element? Should we bring a suitcase in? Should we have your passport on hand? Maybe we need to think about shooting this not in your home like we had originally talked about. 3 weeks out might be kind of short notice to do that. But like, what are your goals? And then how can we plan the shoot to support those? That's the number one question that I would suggest asking. And then from that, starting to look at the client's different streams of revenue and how you can build out a shot list that speaks to and supports each of those streams of revenue. So like if they're a speaker, photos that support that, not just them talking to talking to their laptop, but like maybe them sketching out a talk or reading a book that's all about TED Talk speakers or something like that. If they're a wedding photographer, maybe them packing their bag. If they're a wedding planner, maybe them like working through a mood board for one of their clients or setting a table or something like that. How can you create photographs that support not only their upcoming marketing goals, but also their streams of revenue?
Yes. And I love that, like you mentioned a lot of like the behind the scenes look into what they're doing and not the, because I remember my first branding photo shoot where I was sitting there
smiling at your laptop,
cheesing at my laptop, and and like looking over the
all done
camera
it,
every
it's
now
okay.
and then, just cheersing my coffee.
Yep.
And those were fine. They got likes and everything on Instagram, but they didn't move my business forward in any.
Well, and the thing is that they don't stand out, and the whole purpose of But like, and I think that those photos of people on their laptops, like I still take a couple of those at every brand shoot because they're helpful to have in your library in case you ever need a photo of you at work.
Right.
But like at the same time, the point of a brand shoot is to help put a face to the visual, like put visuals to your messaging and to help you stand out. And so if all we ever shoot is more photos that blend into the existing social media landscape, you're not really doing anything to help your client other than giving them gray matter to put all over their website. And I say gray matter, I feel like that's something, doesn't Hercule Poirot use that to talk about your brain? He calls it your gray matter.
I think so.
Sorry,
yeah.
Okay. So I mean, like, just forgettable, like fodder, it's just fodder for your website, and it doesn't do anything to help connect you to your target audience. And so it's like, how can we take things a step further and not just think about, well, what's the very literal interpretation of this like, okay, you're a watercolor artist. Here you are holding a paintbrush. Like, you can tell they're a watercolor artist because they have a paintbrush in their hand. Like, could we document the process of create, not just the tools that it takes, but the process? Yes, include the product, but also what does it take to get to that final product? That's an important part to document as well.
Yeah, because like that's what intrigues me. Like listening to like the How I Built This podcast, or like the show, what is it, How It Got Made, or something similar, where it's going through like just making a pencil. I don't have any pencils. I have pens now, but like going through how, like, where the
graphite came from,
graphite and the wood and all, like all of those different things, and moving through that, like that is what's interesting to me, and what would stop my scroll as I'm going through, and not just someone holding a pencil. Just being
it's like same, different. Like, what's the thing that's going to make it different and make it stand out? And you telling a story within the frame is going to do that. And I think that's why my work started standing out. Like, I started doing brand photography in a way that nobody else had done it before, and I didn't realize it at the time. But when it started to take on a life of its own, and we started getting inquiries from like Caitlin James and Mary Morantz, and you look at that and you're like, what's happening here?
Right.
Why is this happening? And it's because there was a story being told within the frame, whereas everyone else was just settling for the very literal interpretation of, she's a watercolor artist, you can tell because here she is holding a paintbrush. Whereas my photographs were, the brand was, bled into every corner of the frame. And I didn't realize I was doing it at first until I had to teach my process, because I used to teach as a wedding photographer. We had a wedding photography course, and I love teaching. But when we transitioned to brand photography, at first I was like, no, I don't want to teach that. Like, this is my thing. I'm the only one who shoots like this. I like that I'm the only one who shoots like this. Caitlin James, sweet Caitlin, was like, Abby, don't you think there are a lot of other photographers in the world who could really benefit from what you teach to like shoot their local small businesses who probably would never have hired you in the first place? And I'm like, yes, Caitlin. You are right. Yes. So when I started breaking down the process to teach it, I realized, this is what makes it stand out, is there's a story being told from all the way from the background of the frame. Like, we call it the 5 layers of depth. It's the background, your backdrop, your background details, the outfit, the foreground details, and then pose, action, and expression. And then when you can incorporate the brand voice, the brand vibe, the brand visuals into all 5